of those, it'll be easier for you to follow along with the webinar today. All right, let's see if I can get, here we go. All right, so I am Stephanie Summers. I am the ACES coordinator through Atlas, and I also am an ABE instructor at Minneapolis Adult Education. And Patsy, of course, is also joining us today as our tech hostess. And so you can see our pictures there.
Yeah, in case you're not sure what we look like. And I just wanted to remind people I am recording, so just to know that. And then also if there's something you didn't quite catch you want to refer to later, we'll be posting it on the YouTube channel. And of course, if you wanted to later send this information along to a colleague who wasn't able to join us live, then that recording will be available.
Thanks, Patsy. All right, so I am going to talk us through the objectives for today. So we're hoping that after today's webinar, we'll be able to understand what is meant by navigation practices and how they can be embedded in the ABE classroom. We're going to try to identify what is meant by the term true readiness when it comes to college and career preparation. We're going to explain the connection between ACES TIF and developing true readiness. And we are going to engage with some resources for learning more about navigation practices. And as we get started, I thought I would just give a little bit of background. I started looking into this topic last summer when I was asked to think about developing a Navigator PLC for one of the transitions regions. And to start that work, I had a meeting with some people from the MLC. I met with Rob and Teresa over there, who have both have and I think continue to do work on Navigator practices and training volunteer navigators for the classroom. So I met with them, and then I also completed an online course through World Education that we'll learn more about. That's called Finding True North, about navigation practices. And one of the things that I've learned from talking to people and doing this research is that there are a lot of different ideas when people talk about navigators or navigation services. They're terms that don't necessarily have just one clear definition. So I thought it might be a good idea to start out by talking about what are navigation practices and why do ABE students in particular need them. So if you could look at the 3 questions on the screen here. What do you think of when you hear the term navigator or navigation services? What potential roles can navigators fill in ABE programs? And what are some of the risk factors and vulnerabilities that ABE students often share? So there are 2 ways to share your ideas during our webinar, and I do hope everyone's willing to share. You can either chat out using the chat feature that's in your control panel on your menu bar there. Chat is under materials and under polls and tests, or you can use on the attendees tab, you can raise your hand. And if you raise your hand, we can see that you want to talk, and then we can make sure you're unmuted and you can share that way. So it would be great if a couple people took a moment now and shared some ideas so that we can kick off by talking about these different terms. Okay. So if you think about what it might mean, I see Nancy and her crew just chatted out. Navigator is the one who helps steer the boat. The student can lay a career pathway, and then the navigator helps them along the way. Yes, certainly we think of a navigator helping out with students finding their path either through courses or a series of courses, maybe on a career pathway. Raul wrote, it can be a point person to talk to. Absolutely. I liked that steer the boat metaphor. Another one I've heard is the navigator is the one who runs alongside the bicycle. And Elizabeth chatted out. I think you're chatting private, so you know, Elizabeth. Students served by my program often have one or more significant personal barrier. Housing, formerly incarcerated, chemical dependency, lack of childcare, or not enough food. And I think it's probably not just your program. I know students who deal with those same issues. So those would be some of the risk factors and vulnerabilities. And Melissa says the navigator is someone who helps students with the career pathway and also helping with the barriers. So I think if we kind of synthesize some of these comments, another person, Tammy, said the individual also helps students identify and eliminate barriers by empowering them. Yes. So a lot of similar ideas. We're talking about helping students recognize the pathways they want to enter, helping them get there by eliminating barriers. Liz wrote, in running a bridge college prep class, navigation helped learners understand and navigate college systems, registration, financial aid, all the usernames and passwords they need, etc. Also navigate social services to address possible barriers to persistence, transportation, childcare, etc. Yes. So again, this idea that the navigator helps the student understand the steps and also complete the steps needed for continuing along their chosen path to reach their goal. Okay, these are all great ideas. Thanks to everyone who chatted out. That makes it so much nicer when other ideas get shared. So we'll look at our next. Raul, one more comment. I think Navigator can contact the person when they stop coming. Sure. So another thing a Navigator might do is reach out to students if we notice that they're not there, or if the teacher lets someone know that they've stopped coming. And this is one of the other pieces of information about navigators that I found is what we think of navigation services when provided are closely linked to the idea of persistence. And so contacting a learner who's stopped out to try to get them to come back would certainly be one of those things we would do if we're thinking about helping learner persistence. All right, thank you for all the comments. We'll go to our next slide here. Okay, so as I mentioned when I did my introduction, in addition to the great help that I've gotten from the MLC, I also wanted to highlight a couple of resources that have been useful. One is an online course that is free and it's self-paced. The course says it takes about 3 hours to complete. I'm not sure it took me quite that long. So it's certainly not too much of a time commitment. World Education develops a large variety of online courses, and you can find them by going to their EdTech website, and under professional development, the category of course is college and career readiness. And the particular course that I took is called Finding True North, the Role of the Navigator. And I included in the materials tab what I hope is a useful handout that kind of goes through the steps for joining this course for those who might be interested. So that is one thing that I would recommend for anyone who maybe has a program that's really looking to more closely integrate navigation services. The other materials that are free and you can also access through World Education and the National College Transition Network is this College and Career Navigator training manual that was developed by Sandy Goodman. This is a document that you can download as a PDF, and it contains a lot of nice resources and takes you through some helpful, it's a set of training materials for programs who might be looking to train navigators. Both free, both easy to access. So those were two things I have found helpful. And then the third, of course, is the MLC has gone through a lot of trouble to develop this navigation program startup handbook. In the summer, when Summer Institute was happening, I know Teresa, who developed this, was at Summer Institute talking about her process for developing their Navigator training for volunteers. And that has now been compiled into this handbook, which is available on the MLC's website. So you can see the link there in the red box. If you go to the MLC website, it's under volunteer resources and then online materials, I think, and it's this program startup handbook. So another great locally developed resource that you might find useful if you want to delve more deeply into this topic. Okay, so I kind of just wanted to set the stage about where this information was coming from, and then we'll go to our next slide. So in the course, the Finding True North course, and in other materials that I've encountered through NCTN, the National College Transition Network, they define college and career readiness as having 4 areas. So there's personal readiness, academic readiness, career readiness, and college readiness. And of course, then true readiness is right in the center of those 4 circles. When our students have developed competency in all 4 areas, that would be true readiness. So I was hoping that we might be able to pause for just a minute and have people chat out or share some of their ideas of what specific skills our students might need when in each of these areas. So when we talk about personal readiness, for example, what's an example of a skill or a competency that you think an ABE student would have, and that would indicate that they have personal readiness or an aspect of personal readiness? As well for academic readiness, career readiness, and college readiness. So we can start with personal readiness. If people have any thoughts, we can chat them out. So Melissa, time management, absolutely. That is absolutely one of the personal readiness skills. Being able to use a calendar, manage one's time, make it to class, and the other responsibilities in someone's life. I see 2 different people share time management for the personal readiness. And Liz chatted out that when we think of personal readiness, we think of the idea of having our ducks in a row so that someone knows that they're going to need reliable childcare, reliable transportation, etc., before they go ahead and take on their next steps. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And then Elizabeth Bennett said, time management, keeping appointments, and setting priorities with multiple responsibilities. Yes, so kind of being able to prioritize. These are the different kind of pull factors in my life, and how am I going to prioritize those in order to keep up with everything? Consistency in attendance, being able to maintain a budget. Belinda Jones says personal readiness has an aspect of financial stability. Sure, especially if someone's looking to move into a college program, that might be the case. Great. Well, what about academic readiness? What would be some indicators that a student has academic readiness? I really appreciate the chats. It's great to have an audience who's willing to share. So when you think about having academic readiness, I think what comes to my mind is the idea of study skills, that students take some personal responsibility for their learning, that they come to class knowing that it's not just the teacher who's going to give them all the information, but they also have responsibility for that ownership. I see Raul said be able to read college textbooks and take notes. Okay, wonderful. Handle the volume of reading. That's great. Note taking, test taking, being able to manage multiple courses, understanding genres. Oh, yes, so important. We are teaching this in our reading classes right now. Our GED reading classes are doing a unit on text structure and understanding the different types of texts. Ooh, and then Laura's got a good one, checking email, understanding how to upload and download material, so some of that digital literacy. That's great. And then let's move on to career readiness. What would be career readiness skills? Raul added, as far as academic readiness, we had the differences between ebooks and textbooks. Sure, just I think the different ways that we interact with learning media is certainly part of academic readiness. These are really great ideas. It makes me so excited to have an audience that's really participatory today. This is wonderful. Oh, I apologize. It looks like I've been mispronouncing a name. I'm so sorry. Okay, Ralu, I apologize for that. All right, I'm going to do better. Heather says college or career readiness, understanding work hierarchy, being a team player, being able to complete personal assessments so that you're matching your skills that you might need to develop to skills you've already have. Okay, fantastic. All right. And then let's move in. You can keep sharing career readiness, and then we'll move into college readiness. Patsy shared asking for clarification when a task is uncleared. Ralu said have acquired certificates. Elizabeth says following expected procedures. Yes, I think some of these, of course, are both career and college readiness. I think following expected procedures could certainly be both. Asking for clarification could certainly be both. For college readiness, Liz says, I think maybe the whole thing about how the systems work. Yes, which is really where I think traditionally people think of navigation services. How do I apply for financial aid? How do I read my course schedule? How do I know how many classes I have to finish in order to earn this certificate? Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Homework expectations, absolutely. And then all of the registration requirements. How long do I have to drop a course? When can I add a new course? Does this course have prerequisites? All of those are part of the college readiness. Yes. Finding needed resources. Yes, where do I go on campus if I need to find library materials? Where do I go on campus if I need to make an appointment with my advisor? Excellent. Okay, so all of these different skills are ones that our students need to develop in order to have that true readiness. And we're going to be looking at how navigators helped students to develop this readiness, and then how we as ABE teachers can help with that as well. So we'll go to our next slide here, and hopefully from the materials tab, you downloaded something called Sample Navigator Job Description. Okay, and so, oops, excuse me. If you look at that job description, we're going to look at that and think about these two questions. What skills and competencies do you think an ideal navigator would possess? And what would a navigator job description look like? So you have kind of a job description in front of you. You also have a handout that talks about examples of skills, knowledge, personal traits of an effective navigator. And so what we're thinking about is, what we're really going to be doing here is where do the skills of a navigator overlap with those of an ABE teacher? And if you go down the list of examples of skills, knowledge, personal traits, which are the ones that you think a lot of our ABE teachers already have, and which are ones that maybe fall outside of that work? And then with the job description as well, we're looking for areas of overlap. And so, yeah, and I think Laura, organized, stable, mentally and physically. Okay. All right, and that seems like that could be one of the competencies here. So that's a great idea. What about other ideas? Places where the skills and knowledge or the job description kind of overlap with what an ABE teacher, what we think of an ABE teacher's job description. So I think when I look at the list, a lot comes under personal characteristics. So conveys an optimistic attitude, models positive learning environment, caring and compassionate, patient, solution oriented, flexible, and able to think on one's feet. Those definitely describe an ABE teacher. When we look under some of the knowledge and skills and competency, effective communication with a diverse group of clients, certainly that would be most ABE teachers. Laura said positive relationships and all direct support, communication, and data tracking. Yes, thinking about how much we keep track of attendance data, assessment data, different student goals, a lot of that has overlap with being a navigator. Ralu says monitoring progress. Liz says there's overlap, help with career planning. Yes, yes, yes. And then I'll go ahead and go to the next screen because I've already sort of talked about this a little bit. So if we think about sort of like a Venn diagram, we could have ABE teachers on one side, navigators on the other, and then places where they overlap. Let's think about some of the places where we might not see much overlap. What would you think might be outside of your role as an ABE teacher, but might be considered a navigator's duties? So we're looking for areas where there might not be overlap, but just navigator. Maybe that will help us to determine, because ABE teachers maybe can't fulfill all of these duties, but I think there's quite a few that they could. Yeah, so recruitment and marketing materials. Oftentimes, teachers aren't the ones responsible for those things. And so that might be the time. Yes, and Heather and Nancy both had the same ideas. That might be the time to work with someone else in your program or within your district or your consortium to get some help. Knowledge of community resources and social services. That's a good one, Elizabeth, and one I think we'll come back to a little bit later on. Work directly with employers. Yes, so in a lot of times the ABE teacher, unless maybe you specifically do some sort of like workforce or workplace English classes, you're maybe not the one making those connections with employers. So in that case, and same with hooking students up with community resources, I think what we need to do is help show our students how they can make those connections for themselves. And we'll talk about that more a little bit later on. Collaboration with outside industries, yes. So again, we might not be making those connections for our students. Rather, we would be modeling for them how they can get answers to some of their questions from those agencies on their own. And that's kind of what we mean by embedding navigation practices. We want to help students develop some skills that would make it easier for them to overcome their barriers and be successful without necessarily having a designated navigator. So that's what we're going to be focusing on now for the rest of our time together. So we've looked a little bit about what navigators do. We've looked a little bit at how what they do might overlap with the job of an ABE teacher. And now we're going to specifically delve into places where I think we can develop these competencies within our roles. Laura added connecting with social and cultural activities, finding additional funding, student feedback, creating future pipelines academically and career-wise. Yeah, I really think that last one kind of resonates with me. Maybe teachers are often the ones who get feedback from learners about what types of classes they might be interested in or what types of programming they would like to see within a program. And so then if teachers are passing that information along to others within their organization, they might not be the ones to create new classes, but I think that they can play a role in letting leaders know where students' interests are lying. So that's a great point. So we are going to now be looking at the TIF, 4 areas of the TIF overlapping with those 4 areas of college and career readiness. And we are going to start with developing personal readiness by using self-management. So for those of you who maybe are a little bit newer to ABE in Minnesota, our TIF is the Transitions Integration Framework. It is the product that was developed out of our ACES initiative, and ACES stands for Academic, Career, and Employability Skills. The TIF has 6 categories, and one of those categories is is self-management. The definition of self-management in the TIF, self-management refers to steps, strategies, and skills that individuals can use towards the achievement of goals. Some examples include organizing study materials, setting goals, and monitoring progress. Teaching self-management will prepare learners to succeed in environments where there is little guidance, structure, and monitoring. So that's the definition for self-management from the TIF. And then next to that, you see the 3 big skills from this category. Set realistic goals and work to achieve them, manage information and materials for one's own learning and goals, manage time effectively to complete tasks. So inside the TIF, each category has a definition. There are skills and then there are sub-skills. So these are the 3 large skill areas for this category. I didn't list all the sub-skills here, but you can see those in a TIF booklet. Okay, so in the course, the Finding True North course, it gets in a little bit to research about different advising approaches. And it talked about 3 main approaches to academic advising. There is the developmental approach, there is the prescriptive approach, and there is the intrusive approach. Today, the developmental approach seems to be the one that is most often incorporated, most often used by advisors. And the goal of the developmental approach to advising is to help students become more self-aware, develop improved decision-making and problem-solving skills. There is a trend in advising toward learner-centered advising, which sort of looks at advising as a form of teaching. So what we are talking about here is really in line with the research about effective advising that has come out in the past 10 to 12 years. So when we think about helping our students have better self-management skills, we're really looking at sort of taking that approach of being a teacher advisor here. So let's talk about how are some ways that we could embed self-management skills in the classroom. What routines and norms can you implement to help your students develop personal readiness? So some ideas that I have are we can do goal setting activities. We can, oh my gosh, something just happened and I think we lost my presentation. So hold on. Oh, there we go. Excuse me. We can provide means by which students can stay connected and engaged with learning outside of the classroom. We can provide practice with prioritizing tasks and estimating the time needed to complete a task. So time management, as so many of you mentioned earlier. Use a calendar to help students plan their day, week, or unit. One of the teachers in my program has recently been talking about using a like a unit calendar, letting students know when tests and quizzes are being given so that students can then have better ideas if they can help plan their work schedule, make appointments. We understand our students have to miss school from time to time, but maybe we can cut down on the number of days they miss when they're also taking a test, for example, to give them some ownership for that learning so they can plan better about how to be successful in class. Okay, so I see Heather said, I use Schoology to highlight our focus for the week to engage students. So Heather and I work together in Minneapolis, and if Heather has access to a microphone right now, maybe she'd be willing to talk a little bit more about Schoology and how you use it to highlight your focus for the week. Would you be able to do that, Heather?
I've unmuted myself. Can you guys hear me?
We can. You sound great.
Oh, great. I'm just in a room where there's some other people, so if there's background noise, that's why. But
Okay.
yeah, within Schoology, there's the feature that you can do an update. So I've been trying to update my students in the 2 sections of classes that I teach with sort of the plan for the week so that they can make a plan themselves. And then students, I think, are more engaged because they know what to anticipate happening in the class for the week.
That's great. So kind of using, and I know that update, if your students have provided an email, it'll kind of go maybe right into their email that they've got a new update from their teacher, and that's another way for them to know what's happening in school. Is that right, Heather?
Yeah, it depends on their notifications. We're also going to pilot using Remind, which is another app where I could send it out through a web-based website, and it would go directly to the student's cell phone, and the students then opt in to choose that way of receiving information. A colleague of mine, the other Heather, uses that. She's been using it for about 3 weeks with her class, and she feels that students are much more engaged because of that, because they know what to anticipate prior to coming into the class for the day or the week.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Heather, for sharing that. And then Elizabeth chatted out, we are starting to implement online learning logs in Google Docs. Students set a daily goal, do their work, then reflect on whether they met the goal, what they learned, and what they will work on next time. Great. So that's kind of all the pieces. They're setting a goal, they're working towards that goal, and then the reflection and self-monitoring piece. That's fantastic. And Raul said, I received a message. Yes, I saw that same email today, Raul. So that just so you're aware, for certain wireless carriers, Remind might not be free or as accessible as it was before, but still a fairly useful tool. I was doing something low tech in my classroom at the beginning of the school year. I just printed out sort of a weekly calendar grid, and every day I would write what we did in class on Monday, what we did Tuesday, what we did Wednesday, kind of a snapshot. I would let students know if it was a handout or from the book. And then if they were absent when they came into class, I had that hanging right by my sign-in sheet. And they, instead of having to ask me, they could go ahead and see what we did, and then they would know where to look for the materials. Teresa says, I also think having the teacher comment on micro improvements the student is making is extremely helpful. Yes, so I know, Teresa, when you and I have talked in person, you mentioned this is one area where you think a navigator can really make a difference, or a volunteer trained as a navigator is, as teachers, sometimes we only notice larger trends, but if we try to focus on small or micro improvements, that's really motivating for our students and can help to keep them coming back to class. Yeah, great. Does anyone have any other ideas about norms or routines you could embed or implement in your classroom that might help students develop their self-management skills? Things that we can do to help them work on their time management, prioritizing, anything like that. If you have more ideas, you can continue to chat them out. Yep, so yes, thanks, Patsy. So we'll go ahead. I have a test, a quiz that we're going to look at But if you have more ideas, I know sometimes I get feedback that when we move quickly in a webinar, people have ideas, but then they feel like they can't chat them out before we move on. So go ahead and continue to chat out ideas about self-management. And I am going to go ahead and try to launch this test. So I'm going to navigate away from this page. So as part of self-management, we often think about setting goals. So just as a little quick way to see how we're doing, I thought I would do a quick 5-question quiz about what you know about SMART goals. So I will launch this. Hopefully you'll be able to see it on your screen and you can answer these questions. Okay. So hopefully this is working. While you're answering, I will go ahead and read that Laura chatted out, keep an in-class, out-of-class assignment or work log for each subject area. I like that. So here's what we're doing in class, and maybe here are some things that I need to work on out of class to reach my goals. That's great, Laura. What a great idea. Kind of goes along with what another person said about having that Google Doc. If it was a Google Doc, then maybe the student could work on it even when they weren't in school. If it was shared with the instructor could see what the student's working on and maybe provide feedback, and that would be a great way of supporting that self-management. It looks like almost half of us have submitted answers. We've got about 48%, so we'll keep this open for another 30 seconds or so maybe, so that everyone has a chance to answer. I know that there were 5 questions, and we're looking to find out if you can identify what each of the letters in the SMART acronym stands for when it comes to setting up SMART goals. So we've got about 57% of our attendees having answered now. We'll see if we can get that percentage up just a little bit higher before I close the test. 62% now. I'm hoping we get to about 80%. I've got 71% submitted now. We'll keep this open a little bit longer. Okay, 76% submitted. I'll keep this up for 15 more seconds, see if we can get to 80%. That seems like a passable amount of people to have participated. Okay, 10 seconds. 5 seconds. All right, I am going to close the quiz and we can review our answer. You are about to review. So I'll try to review publicly. So it looks like people did great on this. 96% was the average score. As far as what the S stands for in a SMART goal, the S is specific. Okay, the M stands for measurable. The A is achievable, the R is relevant, and the T is timely. So what I'm seeing here is it looks like the only areas we might have had trouble with were the R and the S, but the other letters we were solid. That's great overall. Thanks to everyone who took that test. I'm going to hide the results. And I'm hoping that we are now back to seeing my slides. If we're not seeing the slides, maybe someone can let me know. In the meantime, Teresa chatted out, one way to help students learn to prioritize is to have them write everything they need or want to do and then rank them with a letter like A, B, C, D, E, being something, okay. Okay, I'm gonna try to fix this. With high impact. Once the students get familiar with this, they can begin to do it. Yes, so this idea of prioritizing. I even think doing that together, I'm going to go back, and here we are. Are we seeing my screen again? I think we're seeing my screen again now, I hope. Okay, no, yes, okay, yes, here we go. If you're not seeing my screen, I'm not sure what else I need to do. Oh, I do. There we go.
There you go. There it is. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you. Okay, that's the one tricky wicket about doing a test or poll is sometimes it's hard to get back when you've shared the results. Okay, but let's see. Teresa had this great comment. And so even I think sometimes if you give students maybe a bigger project type thing to work on, maybe writing a longer, like a multi-paragraph essay or creating a presentation and helping them prioritize the different components or steps they have to take in order to get that done. So for example, for a presentation, maybe adding graphics and changing the theme to make it look good would be a little less of a priority than making sure you've got good content from reliable sources. And I think talking through those kinds of things with our learners is great practice. Raul says, I think the most difficult can be the measurable goal. Yes, so when we help our students set goals, helping them to talk about, well, how are you going to know when you've reached this goal, or how are you going to measure your success, can be an area where they maybe need some extra support. Another part of the research is helping students to see the connections between what they're learning in class, the curriculum that you're using, and their goals as being very important for persistence and being tied into the idea of helping them stay on track. Okay, so one other way of thinking about goal setting. About a year or so ago, the MCIS, which is the Minnesota Career Information System, went through a revision process where they added a suite of materials that are just for ABE learners. So some people who maybe have a K-12 background or maybe have worked in a workforce center, you might be familiar with MCIS from that experience, and you might have in the past thought that the language was at a little bit too difficult of a level to use with our adult learners. But ABE put resources into having MCIS develop an ABE component. And as part of this, there is this under the My Portfolio tab in MCIS, if your program has access and if you're able to use this, there is this personal learning plan, which is a great way for students to set a goal and then create a whole learning plan that will really lay out for them what steps they need to take, what classes, what research, what materials they need in order to reach their goal. And so I'm bringing MCIS up now, and I'll bring it up again later on as a really wonderful, very comprehensive tool to use with learners to help develop a lot of these competencies. It has sections that are very, very closely worked to doing career exploration. It has sections that can help with navigating college, talking about where to look for financial aid. If you do an occupational search for an area you're interested in, you can also find out where in Minnesota offers training courses that would help you to be able to enter into that field. MCIS is not a free resource. There is a yearly fee that programs must pay to buy a license. However, it is very affordable For most programs, the fee is on a sliding scale based on the number of learners your program serves. And for most programs, if you're not within the Department of Corrections, which is very, very large, you would only be paying about $100 a year, maybe $150, to access this for the learners in your program. So certainly something to think about. If you're not familiar with MCIS, there is more information on the Atlas website under the professional development in the ACES resource library in the Developing a Future Pathway category. So we'll look at that in a little while, what the ACES resource library looks like in case you didn't get all that. There is more information about MCIS. So really a great thing to look at, bringing in digital literacy, bringing in goal setting, bringing in a lot of these skills that we're talking about today. Teresa chatted out, sometimes the measurable part can be put in place in the outside world. Oh, that's great. What a great idea. So if you're thinking about students saying, you know, a common goal is I want to improve my English. That's what my students always tell me. And so how are you going to know or measure that? Well, maybe I'm reading to my kids for 20 minutes a night, and increasingly I'm able to read a little bit more challenging books. Or when I go to the doctor, I no longer need an interpreter. Or when I fill out a form, I'm able to fill out 80% of it on my own without assistance. That would be a great way, linking what people want to be able to do outside of class and helping them to use that to see their micro achievements would really be, I think, very powerfully motivating for a lot of our students. Thanks for that idea. Okay, so we're going to move now into our next way in which we can develop some of these competencies with our learners by using the TIF. So we're going to look at developing academic readiness with learning strategies. So the definition from the TIF for learning strategies are planned methods, steps, actions, or techniques for facilitating and enhancing the learning and the use of new material. Examples in this category include organizing information, reading or listening for a specific purpose, keeping a learning log, note-taking, or making educated guesses. A successful learner knows when and how to apply a particular strategy. Teaching the skills in this category will help learners work with and understand new material more independently. And then, of course, next to that, you can see our skills. Skill 1, apply appropriate strategies for comprehending oral or written language in text and listening activities. Skill 2, apply appropriate strategies to organize, retain, and review materials in order to aid in understanding and recall. Skill 3 is apply appropriate strategies to compensate for and fill in gaps in knowledge. And skill 4 is articulate awareness of what helps one learn language and content. So these are the larger skills. There are some sub-skills in the TIF. Let's look at ways that we might be able to embed some of these learning strategy skills in the classroom to help our students develop academic readiness. Some ideas that I had were encourage vocabulary study, maybe with journals, flashcards, graphic organizers. If you're STAR trained, I know you've got a whole way of doing this, a whole method that's probably routine. Provide opportunities for students to use word substitution techniques when they encounter unknown words in a text. So instead of just automatically pulling out those dictionaries or phones to translate, maybe from not maybe every time, but providing regular practice with making students try to think about using the context clues to find a synonym that would fit into that story. And that's a word substitution technique that helps them to move past an unknown word. Using text-dependent question sets that really have students going back to the text to answer them, building from sort of main idea through details to inference and prediction type questions, questions that also focus on the language and vocabulary in a text. Providing opportunities for oral paraphrasing and summarizing when reading or listening. and encourage students to be active readers and listeners by teaching text annotation and note-taking skills. So I'd be very interested in seeing other ideas people might have, ways that you work with your students to build up their learning strategy skills so that they're able to tackle more challenging and academic texts and tasks. So if anyone wants to chat a few of those out, I think now would be the time. Okay. Maybe we're thinking. Laura says daily 5-minute strategies. Yes, sentence correction, math problems. So doing like a warm up where you might have some sentence correction, a math problem, and having students solve those every day and then talking through their thinking. Liz says, I like to regularly ask learners to reflect on their own learning strategies, describe them to each other. That's great, describe them. Talk about how did they work for you. And this is metacognition. It's very powerful. So after a first vocabulary test, pair up, tell another student how you studied, how much, where did you study, how did you do on the test, and what are your reflections? Yes. So I have read lots of, I've gone online and looked for lots of different ideas for kind of learning journals that get at this kind of metacognition and having students write answers to questions like that. And I've never thought about having students use partners to have conversations about that. So I think that would be really, really powerful. Heather says she has students annotate their reading passages. Yes, and that can even be at lower levels, really simple things. Like I know one that's always stuck with me is have students write a question mark to something from the text that they have a question mark, write an exclamation point next to something that was maybe new information or that they found really exciting, and maybe using some other symbol like a star next to something that they think might be important to the main idea. Even using symbols like that can really be great for lower level students. Elizabeth says, I find online articles on current events or high interest topics. We read them as a group and answer text-dependent questions. Yes, and using a website like NewsELA, for example, gives you lots of these real timely current event type topics. I know in one of my classes, we just read one about the government shutdown and how that's affecting national parks. And oftentimes they do have some text dependent questions to get you started. And if you have a little prep time, you could maybe add to those. Liz says, when it's explicit and shared, it engenders curiosity and wonder, clear how brains are different. Yeah, I think this is great. I think it's really important for students to understand that there are lots of ways to be a good student, lots of ways to be successful. My way to study might be different from yours, but we can both reach our goals. But I think what's important then is to talk about, yes, I did have a plan for how I prepared for this, and I can tell you what that plan is. That's the really powerful part. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, continue to chat out ideas that you might have. I'm going to go to the next screen and I'm going to explain what these next two slides are. So from that Navigator training manual that we saw at the beginning when I was talking about resources that have been helpful, I adapted this student scenario to try to make it sort of work. I thought it would maybe be relatable to people who work in a lot of different kinds of contexts. So we're going to read this about Luis, and then we're going to think about how could, as a teacher, if Luis was my student, how could I embed some of these strategies in my classroom, and how would they benefit Luis, and which ones do we think might be most beneficial? So let's read about Luis. Luis is 25 and was recently laid off from his warehouse job. He is interested in enrolling in your program because he has a friend who is enrolled, but he doesn't have a clear idea of what he wants to do next. He is really struggling to pay his rent and buy groceries. Since it's winter, the cost of, oops, I just realized it says heading. Sorry, that's heating, adds an extra expense. He doesn't see how he can keep his home heated and pay for public transportation to and from classes. Luis did okay academically in high school, but he is very anxious about having to take tests. When faced with a testing situation, he breaks into a cold sweat and almost canceled the intake appointment with you when he learned he'd have to take a placement test. Okay, I'm going to go to the next screen and then I'm going to read out another great chat that we had added to the chat room here. So Luis begins your program and seems to be doing okay. Around midterm, you learn that Luis has been missing classes. When you contact him and ask him why, he tells you that he has found that homework takes him longer than he expected. He tries to write down everything that the instructors say, but he can't keep up his note-taking, so he's falling behind and worried he'll not be successful. Okay, so I've got two questions on here. Okay, the first one is, how could Luis benefit from his instructor embedding navigation practices? And what do you think would be most beneficial? So we can chat out some thoughts about Luis. And while we're doing that, Teresa added to our last round of comments. She said, a lot of students don't understand, yes, I think I know where this is going, that the answers to questions are found in the reading or even on the board. I find that really pointing this out over and over again helps students realize that they don't always need to know the answer off the top of their heads. It is there in front of them. Teresa, the very first professional presentation I ever gave in ABE was on this topic. I worked with kind of a beginning to high beginning group of ELLs, and we did explicit practice every week in finding the answers in the text. And I would have students take highlighters. We would read the question. We would talk about the question word and what does it mean. So for example, if the question is who, we're looking for the name of a person. If it's where, we're looking for a place. And then I would have them use that highlighter and highlight the sentence or portion of a sentence from the text that told us the answer. And I really did find that that was useful. So let's see. Yep, highlighting. So we covered that. So Elizabeth says, Luis would probably benefit from explicit instruction on and modeling of note-taking. Yes, there were some nice articles recently in the ABE Connect newsletter about doing this in math classes. Absolutely, wonderful and great connection to the newsletter. Yeah, and Teresa says it's really worth the time to explicitly teach our students these, because teaching our students with just kind of a low stakes reading, how to look for the answer in the text, is going to prepare them for test taking, right? So that they understand that those questions are going to be found in the answers to the questions are in the passage. The questions are not about them and their experiences most of the time. Belinda says, help Luis set some SMART goals, perhaps targeted at the skills he feels anxiety about so that he builds skills and confidence around testing and note-taking. Yeah, wonderful. Nancy says, consider a tape recorder so he can listen later to what was covered. Yeah, so maybe take away the pressure to write everything down. He could listen to it and then, or listen to it later, which it would be good review, and also free up his energy during class to really focus on the teacher and think about if there's questions he wants to ask. Raul says he could benefit knowing what local services, yes, this is one of the ones I thought about, could help him regarding transportation and insurance. So just as an example, in Minneapolis, I know Metro Transit has something called the TAP program, which actually, when students enroll, allows them to get a special card. And when they use that card, they only pay $1, I think, to ride the bus, even during rush hour. So knowing that there's programs like that out there might benefit Luis, and then that would eliminate the transportation barrier, hopefully keeping him in school. Astrid chatted out a link to the article that Elizabeth talked about math and note-taking. Laura says, help break things down to manageable chunks or steps. Taping could help, good idea. Sometimes when I've modeled note-taking for my students when in a listening class, for example, I will give them a graphic organizer. I'll use a graphic organizer. I'll write down my notes, and then I really show them because I want them to understand that not everything is equally important. So I'm kind of modeling for them what I thought was important enough to include in my notes and what might not be. And often what can help with that is thinking about those question words, the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why can really form the foundation for a lot of note taking. Especially at our lower levels. These are all really, really good ideas. I am sorry, just went backwards. Okay, here we go. Those are great ideas. If you have any more ideas about Luis, feel free to chat them out. But we're going to go ahead and move on to the next type of readiness. So we're going to look at developing career readiness with the developing a future pathway. And it looks like it might be possible. I'm hoping you can see the whole definition on my screen now. It's the bottom part's a little bit hidden, but I will read this to you. Developing a future pathway builds the aptitude to more fully understand one's own skills, interests, and talents, and how these are transferable to a successful career or success in one's family or larger community. Activities include using a variety of data and research methods to identify and choose a potential pathway, goal setting, and learning about the culture of being a professional in the United States. Teaching the skills in this category will help learners to be more self-actualized and purposeful in the choices that they make about their future. Okay, so the three main large skill areas in this category: evaluate personal skill, strengths, values, and beliefs to inform decisions about one's future pathway; explore available options in order to identify one's future pathway; and effectively complete the steps needed to enter into the selected pathway. Okay, so every student's learning plan. So Laura's saying that she tries to embed this activity into every student's learning plan. And the activity, Laura, that you're talking about is the idea of breaking things down into manageable chunks or steps, so helping the students to see sort of the progression of what they need to do to reach their goals, I think might be what you mean there. So let's look at some of the and career planning or assessments. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to look. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm having trouble with my keeping my slides in the right place. Okay, I'm sorry for that. Thanks for your patience. So these are ideas for routines and norms that you might be able to implement in your classroom to help your students develop career readiness. So some ideas that I had here: provide students with resource. Nope, that's not right. Include a career awareness in general ESL lessons on health, such as lessons on public safety, transportation, etc., by talking about possible jobs in those fields. Provide students with the opportunity to show how to do or make something to other students in a presentation. Create opportunities for students to talk about what they are good at and what they like to do. And provide students with information about where they can go to get help with conducting a job search or practicing for an interview. And Teresa says, I have heard from Career Force employees that learners often need classes on personal hygiene and dress appropriate for interviewing. Yes, so kind of that idea of talking about what it means to be a professional in the United States and the way that we dress and take care of ourselves. And there are quite a lot of things you can read. For example, the Reading Skills for Today's website has multiple texts at different levels that talk about preparing for an interview. It flat out says things like, make sure you don't have onions and garlic, make sure your breath smells good, make sure your body is clean, and things like that. For some students, could be very, could be the difference between making a good impression or not making a good impression. So here are some of the things that could go into helping your students develop career readiness. Teresa added her idea about talking about how we present ourselves for interviews. Are there other ideas that students that you have for helping your students with these skills, other things we might do in our classes? Another good topic of discussion is what information students need to keep. Teresa, it's like I set you up for some of this, because yes, we are going to look at a great resource to help with that on the next slide. MCIS has a resume creator tool where you can put all that information and keep it, and it's really fantastic. So yeah, they need to know, where have you worked for the past 5 years? They need to know the names of their old jobs, where they've got that training, all of that. Often students will only know a manager's first name, not know the name of the business or the address. So to keep those records. Allison, thanks for, I think this is your first time you've chatted out. Thanks for doing that. We build these career readiness and soft skills in our computer classes as well. How to leave a professional voicemail, mail etiquette, email etiquette, how to keep a calendar, etc. Okay. Allison, I know that you've got a lot of experience in this area. If you have anything else you want to share or talk about how this works with your learners, please feel free to unmute yourself and join our the conversation. I know this is one of the areas in which you've done a lot of work. And if there's any other ideas people have, feel free to. Okay, lots of resources here. Okay, great. So one of the things that I wanted to mention here, so the last point, providing students with information about where they can go to get help with conducting a job search. So rather than maybe handing them the information, sitting next to them or doing a class lesson when appropriate about how to maybe go to a workforce center website and read their calendar of course offerings, for example. I know I work in a building in Minneapolis that has the North Minneapolis Workforce Center in our building. And one of the things I show students is that on the website for the Workforce Center, there is a list of daily classes that they have in how to do a search, how to prepare for an interview. So I want them to think about the kinds of questions they might have, and then think about how they can find that information, and modeling for students how they can find those answers and thinking aloud how you do that. Okay, Patsy's going to go ahead and read out a couple of our chats, and then we'll be
Sure.
moving on.
We've had a couple of great contributions here. So Liz mentioned kind of setting up a culture of sharing. So I think that's just such an important point, because networking is something that, as professionals, we do all the time. If you're looking for a position, you put the word out, right? You let people know what you're looking for. You email, maybe you have coffee with certain people who might know of positions that are open. You can do the same thing in your class. And she mentions, a couple of ideas there in the chat. My employer is hiring. I get a bonus for a referral. So lots of good ideas. And then Teresa mentioned agreeing with Allison that those computer skills can be super important. And I just wanted to tack on too, not only are you working on important career pathway skills, but you're also tacking on, of course, those North Star skills that Teresa mentions in her chat as well. So good things. Ralu also mentioned doing some mock interviews. So yeah, lots of great things being offered here as ways that you can build in these routines and norms, and even creating a culture around some of these things in order to develop some of these Navigator skills within your instruction. So yeah, great, thanks. I'll send it back to Stephanie to wrap up with one more. Let's see, from Allison. Our Opportunity Navigator especially goes into career pathways classes and ESL and career development, building relationships with students, working with adult diploma. building course support, leadership, and career readiness skills. Yeah, okay. Looks like a lot of great things happening at your program, Allison. I'm glad you're joining us and able to share some of those. We will of course, the webinar is being recorded, but we'll also try to grab some of these best ideas from the chat box and get those out to people as well. Astrid mentions there's a new category for North Star Digital Literacy. Focused on career search skills, so another thing to be aware of. And earlier in the webinar, we mentioned MCIS, and I know Stephanie's going to mention in a little bit where to find that. You can access it through the Atlas website, and she's done an article on it before as well. So yeah, I'll send it back to you, Stephanie, to move us along.
Thanks, Patsy. That was great. So yes, a couple resources from our ACES resource collection that you might find helpful. The Career Connections from PBS Learning Media, which is in the Developing a Future Pathway category, has many, many videos that you could show in class. This would be a way, for example, if you were talking about something like health or food or community safety, sort of a general ESL topic, but you wanted to bring in a little career awareness, and you could find a video about a job maybe that would kind of fall under the broad category of what you're talking about, have that connection. Showing one of these videos and talking about them in class might be a way to bring that in. And then from MCIS, we've got a couple of other really great resources. On the top, under the assessments tab in MCIS, we've got this thing called Reality Check. This is a really fun tool. Students watch a short video and then they answer some questions about what kind of car they want to drive, what kind of vacations they want to be able to take, where they're going to live. And it helps them to determine how much money they need to earn in order to achieve that lifestyle. And then from there, it also talks about some careers that earn that much money, and it matches it up with different levels of training. So it shows them, if you want to earn, if you need about $50,000 or $60,000 a year in order to maintain the lifestyle you've selected, here are some jobs or some career areas where you might be able to make that much money. Excuse me, my cat just jumped on my keyboard. And then what kinds of training programs would be offered. And then underneath that is what I was mentioning a little while ago when Teresa was talking about helping our students to create kind of a database or a checklist of things, of all that personal information, like where they've gone to school, both paid and unpaid work, achievements and things. And so also in MCIS, this resume creator tool is really, really powerful. It's basically a way for students to enter this information in all these different fields, and then it's all there. So it takes work up front to get it all entered, but then it's saved. And when someone wants to apply for a new position, they're able to pull from these different areas where they've entered their experience, and they're able to create tailored applications and cover letters that highlight only those experiences, the training, the previous jobs that match with that particular opportunity, if that makes sense. So it's a way for students to not only organize and save this information, but then you can draw from it when you want to create a tailored application, resume, cover letter to apply for specific jobs. So a really great tool and one that would be worth checking out. All right, we're going to move on. Allison had something else to say. I hope to share more resources through the Atlas Career Pathways Library, something that Liz curates. I can share more resources wherever it would be appropriate. We just started financial literacy workshops as well through a grant with sensitivity to ESL and cultural differences. I have had people reach out to me asking where they can find more information about financial literacy. So I think that's a topic around which there's a lot of interest. Thank you, Allison. Okay, we're going to try to get through our last section here because I don't want to keep people past 3:30. We're going to look at developing college readiness with our navigating systems. So navigating systems is the ability to successfully operate within the institutions and organizational structures such as school, workplace, or community organizations in one's life. Successful learners are those who are able to adapt to their environment and problem solve when issues arise. Examples of activities in this category could include looking at and evaluating processes, evaluating and fitting into a particular environment, and understanding and breaking down policies. Teaching the skills in this category will assist the learner in understanding new experiences and help them to become their own best advocate. And then we can see that there are 3 skills. Seek information or assistance appropriately from others in order to successfully navigate specific systems. Identify and comply with rules, policies, and performance expectations within institutions and organizational structures. Identify and follow norms of an organizational structure. So that's what we find in this particular category. And then here we've got some ideas for routines and norms we might be able to implement in our classroom to build college readiness. Provide students with resources that help them to find answers to their questions. Do not always provide the answers. Teach basic research skills, such as how to conduct an internet search. And I'm sure that the North Star standards would help us with that. Practice questioning techniques to help students ask the right questions, and provide practice with self-advocacy and teach students how to politely disagree with someone. Okay, so because we're getting close to the end, I'm going to navigate to our next 2 slides, which are another student scenario, this time about a woman named Lucinda, and we're going to talk about how we might be able to help Lucinda by embedding some of these navigation practices. At the same time, if you have any ideas about other ways to build college readiness in the classroom, please chat them out. I think we're all finding the chat really valuable today. So thanks to everyone who's been contributing. So here we go. We've got Lucinda. Lucinda is 38, married, and has 3 school-aged children. She works part-time as a certified nurse assistant in a job that offers no employee benefits. She has a goal of becoming a registered nurse. Her intake assessment indicated that she lacked basic computer skills, such as navigating the internet, word processing, and email. With 3 children, it is challenging for Lucinda to find time to attend classes and study. A few months into the school year, you notice that Lucinda has missed a week's worth of classes. You contact her and learn that her mother has died and she needs to pack up her apartment. She will not be able to return to classes for another week. She also tells you that she is feeling quite depressed about her mother's death. Okay, so just like before, we're going to think about how could Lucinda benefit from her instructor embedding navigation practices, and what do you think would be most beneficial for a student like Lucinda? So we'll hopefully see a little bit of information on the chat, and this will be kind of our last chat out for today, and then we'll just move into our wrap up. Okay. So we'll see if anyone's got any ideas. So let's see. So Teresa says, definitely having the teacher navigator just listen. Yeah. So if the teacher's able to maybe set up some time to listen to the student, let her know that she's supported, let her know that she can take time to work through everything that she's managing right now. Liz says, as far as navigation goes, the importance of communicating what's going on. Consider your instructor your ally, right? So, okay, that's perfect. So I think that idea of building community, building trust, and those relationships also linked to the idea of increasing learner persistence is really important. Maybe helping her find a support group in the community, helping her learn how she might search for something like that in her area could be useful. Laura says, yeah, so Nancy had the same idea. Connect to a local church or other grief support groups. Laura says, resource for childcare, help to give her time to pack up her mom's place. Yeah, I think letting her know that it's okay for her to take the time that she needs and that school will be ready for her when she's able to come back could be useful in an instance like this. Okay. So if you have other ideas, let's go ahead and chat those out. So you can continue to chat, and we're going to look now, we're going to look at when I've been talking about the ACES resource library, where do we find that? So on the Atlas website, atlasabe.org, there under the resources tab, there are different online libraries. One of those libraries is the ACES resource library. And so you would go here. The library is organized into 6 categories according to the TIF. And so as you can see here, we've got our 6 TIF categories, and you would click on the one that you are interested in learning more about. So for example, if I clicked on self-management, for example, I might find this information about the Growth Mindset Toolkit, which would be one of the resources that would help our learners to develop self-management skills. In fact, one of the big tenets of growth mindset is reframing everything from it hasn't happened or I haven't done that to I haven't done it yet or it hasn't happened yet. And when I was taking the True North course, one of the advisors that they talked to shared that just reframing things with that word yet is one of the tools that she uses indeed. Okay. So again, there's articles and websites and information for each of the 6 categories, and we can click on those. Every time a new resource is added, it comes out in the ABE as a newsletter article, okay? So kind of to wrap up here, maybe we could think about what we've talked about today with those 4 categories. And if you can maybe think of one thing you think you might be able to use in your classroom, one thing you might be taking back to your students or to your staff, if you could share that out, that would be great. And then I know some of you might be interested in getting CEUs for this this webinar. We don't automatically issue CEUs usually after a webinar, but if you contact me, I believe that I can request those for you. And I don't know if Patsy or Astrid would have anything to add about that, but I think
Yeah,
that's
I can jump in. Yeah, great question from Liz that I was just reposting, so thanks for calling on me. Yeah, I think what we're going to do for this one, because it is a large group and I know a couple different people have asked about CEUs, is I'll simply do that automatically. There's no need to email us this time, since I'll just, I get a report of how many people were here and your emails, and I'll just email those to Gail and you'll get the CEUs in your inbox. So no need to do anything. You'll get those. It might not be like immediately, but within a couple of days. If you don't hear from us by the end of the week, perhaps let us know and we'll be sure and get those CEUs your way.
okay. Thank you so much, Patsy. So yeah, I am very happy to help anyone with that. So we will certainly get that taken care of. You will also be you will also receive a link when we end today with a evaluation. And if you could fill out that evaluation, there will be a second ACES webinar in April. And it really, really helps us to plan what to do during these webinars, what people might find valuable. If you kind of tell us that, one of the evaluation questions asks about what other topics you might find useful as far as ACES and transitions go. So Laura says that her current focus is on student self-management. So hopefully you maybe found 1 or 2 practices you could do in class today for that. And we've got Heather says learning strategies is something she's focusing on. I may have students discuss their own strategies in table groups after reading a long or dense text. It happens a bit now, but I'll be more explicit about it. Belinda says, I will review resources on MCIS as well as the ACES resources library. This topic is very timely for us. We are focusing on communication and navigation. Great, Allison. I want to be more intentional about teaching text annotation and note-taking strategies. Fantastic. I plan to keep doing work on self-management, having students keep calendars and set goals. Wonderful. Okay, great. So I really want to thank you. I have had so much great participation today. I want to thank all of you for the comments that you make. I think that's what makes these webinars valuable. It's not just listening to me, but it's learning from each other. And it's great when we're able to do that with people from all over the state. And all we have to do is get online. And Liz says several resources I plan to share with Adult Career Pathway Design Cohort. Wonderful. Okay, so we will end today with some information about other professional development opportunities that are coming up. I think Patsy's going to talk about those.
Sure. So a couple of things on your screen. Just a heads up that the Language and Literacy Institute is actually coming up just next week on Thursday and Friday, and you do need to register by Friday. They've extended the time where you can get your hotel at the reduced rate until this Friday, but you do need to get on it this week. So that's an event every year. It's for anyone who touches reading, writing, or ESL in your work. So that's pretty much all of us. So I hope you can join us. That's here in Roseville. Regional events coming up in a couple of months, starting off with Metro kicking off in St. Paul on the 22nd of March, and then over the next few weeks in Walker and Mankato. And then, of course, mark your calendars for the next ACES spring webinar, which will be on April 23rd. And we've yet to decide exactly how we'll spend that time. So please fill out your evaluation. That'll be kicked at you via email and perhaps right as you exit the webinar today, because we'll be gathering ideas on what to focus on, how to spend our time wisely so that it's of best use to those of you who join us. So thanks so much. And thank you to Stephanie for today's webinar.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who joined us. I know that we did move through kind of a lot of information today. If there was something that you wanted more information about, or you were wondering where that information came from, feel free to reach out to me directly through email. Or if it was just something you maybe want to hear more about in a future webinar, you can include that in your evaluation. You should get your evaluation when you leave today, and then if you don't fill it out, or even if you do fill it out today, you'll get a reminder tomorrow in an email form. So you only have to fill it out one time, of course. It's short. I think it's only 4 questions, so it shouldn't take too much of your time. All right. That's all I have for today. This was really the first time I've publicly had the opportunity to talk about this topic. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for all of the contributions that you made. And I really appreciate everyone taking time today to be here. So I hope everyone has a great day and great week. And we can be on for a couple minutes if there are questions, but otherwise we're finished. So thank you all very much.